The signal below. The Abyssal Dawn was never meant to dive this deep. She was a mid-tier research vessel, retrofitted for deep-sea exploration, but not rated for the Hadal Zone, the realm beyond 6,000 meters, where sunlight never touched and pressure could crush steel like paper. But the signal had come from deeper than that. Dr. Mara Voss stood at the reinforced viewing port, watching the water turn from ink blue to black. Her breath fogged the glass. The hum of the submersible's engines was the only sound besides her own heartbeat. Behind her, Captain Rourke kept his eyes on the depth readout. 8,000 meters, he muttered. Hull integrity at 93%. You sure about this, Doc? The signal's too consistent to be geological, Mara said. It's pulsing in a Fibonacci sequence. Nature doesn't do that by accident. Rourke grunted. Plenty of things down here we don't understand. From the rear console, Eli Trent, the ship's engineer, piped up. Plenty of things we don't want to understand, either. The first burst of static hit at 8,400 meters. The lights flickered. Then came the sound, faint but undeniable, a pattern of 3 short tones, 2 long, then 3 short again. That's not Morse code, Eli whispered. No, Mara said. It's older. The deeper they went, the more the sub felt wrong. Not breaking apart, Rourke's reading said the hull was holding, but as though the water itself was heavier. Movement was sluggish. The ballast tanks groaned more than they should have. And the dark outside wasn't empty. Shapes drifted just beyond the range of the floodlights. Long, sinuous forms with too many joints. Sometimes they moved like fish. Sometimes like nothing that should exist. Do you see that? Mara asked quietly. Eli didn't look up from the controls. Nope. And neither do you. The signal grew louder at 9,100 meters, echoing faintly through the hull, as though the steel itself carried the sound. Then the sonar pinged. The alien shape filled the display, vast, jagged, embedded into the trench wall. Too symmetrical to be rock. Rourke's voice dropped an octave. That's a building. It wasn't just a building. As the floodlights swept over it, patterns shimmered across its surface, geometric carvings that pulsed faintly like veins. Mara's mouth went dry. It's responding to us. Eli shook his head. No. It's calling to us. The docking bay looked almost human-sized, though the proportions were subtly wrong. Doors just a little too tall, angles a little too sharp. The moment they approached, the signal stopped broadcasting through the water. It was coming from inside now. The interior dock was dry, bone dry, which made no sense at this depth. As the airlock opened, a warm, metallic scent hit Mara's nose, like blood left in the sun. Their helmet lamps lit a long corridor, lined with strange ridges in the walls. At first, she thought. Eli froze. That wasn't a trick of the light. No, Mara said. It's alive. They moved deeper. Their comms began to pick up faint whispers. Words none of them recognized, layered over each other in impossible harmonies. Every step forward made the hull of the Abyssal Dawn creak behind them, as if the structure didn't like letting its prey leave. Rourke's hand hovered over his sidearm. We're in and out, document. You hear me? Get your readings and we go. But Mara couldn't stop staring down the corridor. The air felt thick, almost like it was pushing her forward. And at the far end, just before the next archway, something moved. The movement at the far end of the corridor was quick, a flicker, almost humanoid, slipping behind an archway. "Did you see that?" Mara whispered. Rourke tightened his grip on his sidearm. "Saw it. Didn't like it." They advanced, boots scraping against a floor that wasn't quite metal, something denser, faintly warm underfoot. The moment they stepped through the arch, the door behind them slid shut with a sound like bone grinding against bone. Rourke rushed back and tried to pry it open, but the surface had no seams now. The arch was smooth, seamless wall. Eli's voice cracked. "That wasn't there before. It just grew over." The corridor opened into a chamber the size of a cathedral. Pillars of dark, glistening material stretched from floor to ceiling, etched with spiraling grooves. In the center was a column of light, soft, golden, almost inviting. The signal they'd been chasing pulsed from within it. Mara approached, every instinct screaming not to. The light seemed to shift, forming vague shapes, human-like figures, each frozen mid-motion. Their faces were indistinct, but she could feel the expressions, fear, awe, resignation. And under the light's hum, there was something else, a low rhythmic thump, like a heartbeat. Eli circled one of the pillars. "These aren't carvings. They're—" His sentence died. Where his gloved hand had touched the surface, the grooves had rearranged themselves, twisting toward his skin. "Reacting," he finished hoarsely. It started with Eli's suit readout. Heart rate spike. Elevated body temp. Then came the static in his calm, even though he was only meters away. Rourke waved a hand in front of him. "Trent? You hearing me?" Eli blinked slowly, like it took effort. "It's showing me something." "What?" Mara asked. His voice turned dreamy. "A city. Above us. Lights in the water, like stars. It's so beautiful." When Rourke grabbed his shoulder, Eli screamed, not in fear, but rage. "Don't touch me!" The grooves on the pillar pulsed in time with Eli's heartbeat. The whispers in their comms grew louder, slipping into recognizable words. Not English, but meaning slid unbidden into Mara's mind. Stay. Listen. Join. Shadows moved along the walls, not cast by their lights, but independent. Once, Mara thought she saw her younger brother's face among them, smiling faintly. Rourke swore he heard his dead wife's voice calling him from deeper inside. He started toward the sound before Mara caught his arm. "That's not her," she said. "How do you know?" "Because mine's here too." They found another passage, narrower, lined with organic-looking ridges. The walls pulsed faintly, as though fluid moved within them. The signal was deafening now, a low, vibrating tone that they felt more than heard. The passage ended in a massive circular door. In the center was a symbol, 3 short marks, 2 long, 3 short again. "It's the pattern," Mara breathed. As they watched, the door irised open, revealing a cavern filled with floating shapes, dozens, maybe hundreds, suspended in some kind of fluid. Human shapes. The figures floated with eyes closed, limbs slack. They weren't decomposed, despite some wearing clothes decades out of style. Eli stepped forward, hands trembling. "They're alive!" Mara scanned one with her wrist unit, faint pulse, slowed brain activity. A state between sleep and death. A voice, Eli's, but not his, came through the comms. "We are not alone here. We are never alone here." The floating bodies twitched in unison. The door behind them slid shut. Rourke fired his sidearm at the walls. The bullets sank in with a wet sound, then were gone, absorbed. The floor rippled under their boots. Eli dropped to his knees, clutching his head. "It's in my mind." He looked up, and his eyes were no longer brown. They glowed faintly gold, reflecting the column of light. "You don't understand," he said. "We called it here, long before we were born. And now it wants us back." Mara pulled Rourke toward the far wall, where a faint seam hinted at another way out. "We can't leave him," Rourke growled. "That's not him anymore." Eli was already walking toward the fluid chamber, shedding his helmet. The fluid rose to meet him, wrapping around his skin. He didn't struggle. The seam opened as they approached, not like a door, but like a mouth. Beyond it, darkness waited. The moment Mara and Rourke stepped through, the seam sealed behind them with a wet hiss. The air was heavier here, warmer, thick with the same metallic tang they'd smelled at the dock. Their suit readouts were going haywire. Fluctuating pressure, false oxygen warnings, heart rate spikes. "This place is playing with us," Rourke muttered. Mara was already scanning the walls. The surface here wasn't smooth like before. It undulated slowly, as though breathing. Then something beneath the skin shifted, pressing out toward them. It had fingers. Too many of them. The corridor ahead branched in two. From the left passage came a faint blue glow. From the right, a sound. Something dragging across the floor. Slow. Heavy. Rourke pointed to the left. "Light means tech. Tech means a way out." Mara hesitated. "Or bait." The dragging grew louder, accompanied by a wet, rasping breath. They ran left. The passage ended in a circular chamber with walls of transparent material. Beyond it was a view of the trench, but distorted, as if they were seeing through water. In the center of the room stood a machine, or maybe an altar. Its surface was covered in the same spirals as the pillars outside, but these shifted constantly, flowing like liquid. Mara approached. "This is the source." The signal tone pulsed once, twice, and the spirals froze, then began to mirror her heartbeat. The glass walls darkened, and in the reflection, she saw something behind her. Not Rourke. It was tall, thin, and long, its limbs bending in ways no skeleton could allow. Its skin was the same black, pulsing material as the walls, and its face was smooth except for a single slit where a mouth should be. It tilted its head like it was listening. Rourke fired. The bullets didn't penetrate. They just made the thing ripple. Then it stepped forward, out of the wall. They ran. The corridors twisted in impossible ways, one moment rising, the next spiraling downward. Sometimes they swore they passed the same spot twice, but the walls had changed, mouths opening and closing along the surface. The thing didn't hurry. It didn't have to. Every few turns, they would glimpse it ahead instead of behind, as though the ship, no, the creature, was moving it around like a chess piece. Mara stopped in a junction, panting. Her wrist scanner was still tracking the signal, but now it pulsed in time with both her and Rourke's heartbeats. "It's syncing to us," she said. "It's learning us." Rourke's face was pale. "Why?" She met his eyes. "So it can replace us." They reached a chamber where the walls shimmered like water. Through them, Mara saw the surface, sunlight rippling through waves. She saw herself stepping out of the sub, safe on the abyssal dawn. She almost took a step forward. Then she saw her reflection blink out of sync. The shimmer peeled away, revealing not the ocean, but the fluid chamber they'd seen before, hundreds of human figures floating inside. One of them had her face. Rourke found a narrow shaft leading upward. It was cramped, slick, and smelled like decay. But it was real, not an illusion. They climbed. The sound of the thing's dragging steps echoed below, but it didn't follow. Halfway up, the walls of the shaft began to pulse, contracting slightly. "It's trying to close on us," Mara gasped. They climbed faster, feeling the heat of the walls against their suits. At last, they reached an opening, a small, organic hatch that led back into the docking bay. The sub was there. Rourke ran for it. "We're getting out." Mara's eyes swept the bay. No sign of the thing. No sound except the soft hum of the structure's heartbeat. They climbed inside and began the launch sequence. The bay's hatch groaned open, revealing the crushing black outside. As the sub detached, Mara's scanner lit up. The signal was no longer behind them. It was inside. Rourke checked the rear camera feed. Floating just outside the sub's hull was Eli. No suit. No bubbles rising from his body. He smiled, and his eyes glowed gold. The feed went black. The sub's ascent was slow. Every few hundred meters, the lights flickered. Mara kept her eyes on the scanner. The signal was multiplying. One pulse became 2, then 4, then 8. Rourke swore under his breath. "It's hitching a ride!" From somewhere deep in the sub, metal groaned, not from pressure, but from something moving through the walls. The comm system crackled to life. Mara. It was her brother's voice. He'd been dead for 15 years. "You don't have to fight it. Just let it in. It's beautiful here." She muted the channel and kept her hands locked on the controls. The walls of the sub began to pulse faintly. At last, they breached the thermocline, sunlight faint above. But the signal was stronger now than it had ever been. The water around the sub shimmered faintly. Not from light, but from movement. Shapes, almost human, swam just outside visibility. One pressed its face to the viewport. It was Mara's reflection, smiling. The sub broke the waves, salt spray hitting the glass. The abyssal dawn floated in the distance, untouched, quiet. As they approached, Mara saw crew members waving from the deck. Rourke slowed. "Something's wrong." The waiting crew didn't blink. They didn't breathe. Their faces were too smooth. Mara sent one last data burst to the surface authorities. "Do not answer the signal. Do not send ships. Burn everything." Before she could hit send, the sub-system shut down one by one. The last thing she saw was the deck of the abyssal dawn opening like a mouth, the water around it pulling them in. Weeks later, a different research vessel picked up a faint, rhythmic pattern from the trench. 3 short pulses. 2 long. 3 short. They logged it as a possible distress call and turned toward it. The 9th wave. The Calypso moved through a slick, black plain of water. No stars. No moon. The only light came from the ship's deck lamps, throwing long golden fingers over an endless surface. Marcus Vale stood at the bow, gloved hands curled around the railing. He could hear the water slap and suck against the hull, a strangely slow rhythm, almost like breath. From the bridge, Jonah Reeves leaned in the doorway with a mug of coffee. "You're staring like you expected to blink." Marcus didn't look up. "Feels like it already has." Jonah joined him at the railing. "Compass keeps drifting east. 2 degrees every minute. Chloe says it's some magnetic anomaly." Marcus finally glanced over. "You think anomalies swallow freighters whole?" Jonah's smile was faint, almost absent. "Not unless you ask the wrong kind of sailor." In the bridge, Chloe Moran tapped a pen against her sonar console, bored and restless. She adjusted the gain. Static, static, then something new. 3 slow thuds. Pause. 3 slow thuds. Pause. She froze. "Cap, I've got something deep." The sound filled the bridge speakers, too deep to be mechanical. Marcus came in, studied the readout. A smooth oval depression under the map seabed. Depth unmeasurable. Dr. Adrian Kessler, their corporate observer, entered without knocking, her parka pristine. "That's where she went down." Marcus nodded. "The Cassandra." Mess hall, 2100 hours. The crew sat at the table in low light, the hum of the engines filling gaps in the conversation. Marcus Vale, 52, captain, weathered and calm. Jonah Reeves, 34, ex-Navy diver, steady but unreadable. Chloe Moran, 27, sonar tech, sharp-tongued. Elise Park, 31, marine engineer, practical, skeptical. Owen Laird, 29, ROV pilot, pale, twitchy fingers. Dr. Adrian Kessler, 40, Benetton Corp, all polite control. Jonah broke the quiet. "This patch of water has a name. 9th wave." Elise raised an eyebrow. "Like a storm thing?" Jonah's voice lowered. "Old superstition." Calm seas, no wind, then out of nowhere, the 9th wave hits. The one you can't ride. Kessler's smile was polite and precise. "Myths are just uncollected data." Nobody laughed. Night 112. Chloe alone at sonar. She watched faint arcs on her screen, movement deep below, too slow to be a current. They rose toward the surface, then sank again. She didn't call anyone. Some things, she thought, you only share once you're sure they're real. Dawn broke without changing the color of the sea, still black, still flat. Owen released the ROV, its floodlights cutting cones into the dark as it sank. At 400 meters, the light dimmed to green. At 1,000, it was swallowed completely, the cameras picking up only drifting particulate. At 1,200 meters, something crossed the beam, a pale oval shape. Rewind. Freeze. It was a face. Eyes closed, hair drifting. Lips just slightly parted. "Christ," Jonah muttered. At 1,700 meters, the seafloor appeared, jagged ridges surrounding the depression. And in the center, the Cassandra. She was upright, clean, untouched by rust or barnacle. The dining hall windows were clear. Inside, tables were set with crystal glasses, silverware polished. Owen maneuvered the ROV into an open hatch. The light swept across a grand piano, sheet music still open mid-song. 6 months underwater, Elise whispered. And no decay? Drop a beacon, Marcus said. We dive tomorrow. That night, Chloe woke to the sound again. 3 beats, pause, 3 beats, pause, but this time, it wasn't coming from the sonar. It was coming from the hull. Marcus, Jonah, and Elise entered the Cassandra through the same hatch. Inside, they were not underwater. Their boots hit carpet, their helmet lamps lit air that shimmered like it was underwater but wasn't. The temperature was mild, the pressure normal. The chandelier swayed in an invisible current. Portraits on the walls showed the sea, black, with pale shapes twisting in the dark. They split up. Jonah in the lounge found a handbag open on a table, lipstick uncapped. Elise followed wet, bare footprints down a corridor until she saw a man in a captain's uniform. "Hello?" she called. He turned. His face was swollen, his eyes solid black, brine trickling from his lips. He smiled. The lights flickered, and he was gone. Marcus in the galley found pots steaming over coal burners. He backed away without touching anything. On surfacing, no one spoke until Kessler said, "You'll go deeper tomorrow." The next dive took them into the depression beneath the Cassandra. The seafloor was smooth, carved with spirals and glyphs the size of buildings. The rhythmic sound now shook their bones. Then the rock shifted. It wasn't rock. It was an eye, lid made of coral and stone, twitching open. Black pupil, vast and endless, reflecting their own tiny shapes. The lid opened wider, revealing a trench lined with rib-like pillars. Inside floated dozens of passengers from the Cassandra, not dead, but moving. Their eyes were black. They reached with slow, beckoning hands. On the surface, Chloe's sonar warped. The depression widened. The Calypso tilted toward a slow whirlpool forming around the rising mass. Engines at full couldn't pull them free. "It's surfacing," Kessler said, calm but pale. Marcus made the call. "Cut tether, run." Jonah refused. "It'll take everything that crosses here. We end it now." They planted charges along the glyph lines. The eye followed them the entire time. In the trench mouth, the black-eyed passengers drifted closer. The detonation rolled through the deep like a muffled thunderclap. The depression contracted violently, dragging the Cassandra and its passengers down into blackness. The whirlpool slowed. The sea stilled. 2 days later, a fishing trawler found Jonah adrift in a life raft. He was humming. 3 beats. Pause. 3 beats. Pause. When the crew pulled him aboard, they realized he wasn't humming. He was breathing in time with it. The blue below. The supply ship Orpheus cut across the steel-colored Pacific, her deck slick with salt spray and lit in a thin strip of dawn light. Somewhere far below their course, deeper than sunlight could reach and deeper still than most unmanned drones had dared to go, lay the Tiamat Trench, a gouge in the seafloor stretching 7 miles down, uncharted and, until recently, unmapped. Dr. Helena Voss leaned over the starboard railing, the taste of brine on her lips. She wasn't a sailor. She was an oceanographer with a specialty in paleoceanography, studying sediments and water chemistry to reconstruct Earth's ancient past. But the trench had hooked her. A few months ago, seismic scans from a survey drone had revealed a feature at the bottom that looked almost geometric. That was all it took. Funding poured in from a mix of universities, private investors, and, disturbingly, a cultural preservation foundation with vague origins. The crew was small, 13 people in all. Captain Rourke, a leathery, taciturn man who'd spent half his life moving cargo through pirate waters. Sanjay Patel, the submersible pilot, young, sharp-eyed, and unshakably calm under pressure. Mara Ito, the engineer, who could fix anything mechanical but disliked the water. Eric Dahl, deep-sea biologist, eyes always searching the waves for movement. Plus technicians, a medic, a documentary cameraman named Caleb, and Helena's grad student, Lena, who carried more coffee than equipment. By noon, the trench marker appeared on their sonar readouts, a cliff of darkness dropping off into what the display marked only as data gap. The Orpheus carried one deep-diving submersible, Nereid, designed to withstand 11 miles of pressure, over-engineered, but that was the point. This first ascent was to be cautious, down to 4 miles, collect water samples, retrieve sediment cores, take high-res scans. Helena watched as Mara and Sanjay prepped Nereid. "You nervous?" Sanjay asked, not looking up from the console. "About the pressure?" Helena shook her head. "About what's down there?" "Yes." By 1400 hours, Nereid slid into the water, canopy sealed, hull lights blazing into blue-green murk. Inside, Helena, Sanjay, and Caleb were crammed shoulder to shoulder. Above them, the surface faded quickly. Within minutes, they were in the twilight zone where the last natural light bled away. Pressure readings climbed. Outside, bioluminescent creatures drifted like stars in an inverted night sky. A comb jelly pulsed past, rainbow light cascading along its body. Deeper still, something eel-like with too many eyes regarded them before twisting away. "For 1,000 meters," Sanjay said. His voice was steady, but Helena saw his grip tighten on the controls. Approaching shelf drop-off. The trench wall rose in the sub's lights, a cliff face pocked with caves. Some looked naturally formed. Others didn't. Rectangular openings, edges softened by time, angled downward into the abyss. Caleb's camera whirred, recording. Helena pressed her face to the viewport. "These aren't volcanic." She couldn't explain how she knew. The symmetry was wrong for lava tubes. Sanjay adjusted their angle, letting the light sweep over a larger opening. Inside, something glittered. Not fish. Not metal. Something like stone, carved with deep grooves that spiraled in patterns Helena half recognized. Her mind flashed back to graduate school, to an obscure Phoenician artifact found on the Mediterranean seafloor, carved with similar concentric marks. Except this was bigger, older. Impossible. A sound thrummed through the hull, low, almost too deep to hear, but Helena felt it in her teeth. Caleb swore, checking his audio equipment. "Was that?" The lights flickered. A shadow passed over the opening, and the grooves disappeared into darkness. Sanjay didn't wait for anyone to suggest retreat. "We're heading up." His voice was tight. "This isn't in the plan." Helena wanted to argue. She wanted to demand they go closer, get samples. But something primal in her bones told her that whatever had just moved between them, and that ancient doorway was aware of them now. They rose in silence, the thrum fading as they ascended. Above, the ship was a speck of light on the gray horizon. The Orpheus crew crowded the mess hall after the dive, bowls of reheated stew steaming on the table, but going largely untouched. Caleb replayed the video footage, frame by frame, the glow of his laptop casting everyone's faces in a cold light. The cave mouth loomed on screen. Its proportions were unsettling, taller than the Nereid, with sides that seemed to taper inward like an inverted pyramid. The spiral grooves were clearer on playback, weathered yet deliberate. Helena leaned forward, tracing them in the air with her finger. "I've seen these before," she murmured. "Where?" Lena asked, chewing her lip. "Fragments," Helena said, "off the coast of Tyre. And again in sediment cores from the Yucatan Shelf. Different continents, different epochs. None carbon dated younger than 12,000 years." Mara frowned. "So you're saying whatever built that was around before recorded history?" "Before agriculture," Helena said. Captain Rourke broke the silence with his gravelly voice. "Then it's best left alone. You brought us here to explore," Helena countered. "I brought us here to map," Rourke said, "not to poke at ghosts." But poking was exactly what the investors wanted. That night, Helena received an encrypted message from the Cultural Preservation Foundation, coordinates deeper in the trench and an instruction: find the source of the spiral mark. Document everything. Bring artifacts if possible. The sum they promised for compliance was obscene. Sleep came in fits. Helena dreamed of standing on a vast, black stone plaza under a sky the color of deep water, spiral symbols cut into the slabs beneath her feet. The grooves writhed, shifting like tentacles, and from the far edge of the plaza something massive began to rise. She woke to the ship's engines rumbling as they repositioned over the trench. By mid-morning, they were prepping near it for a second descent, this time with Lena replacing Caleb to assist with geological sampling. Mara protested, citing pressure on the subsystems, but Rourke overruled her. "We're here. We do the job." Helena strapped into her seat as Sanjay ran the checklist. Lena clutched a waterproof tablet like a talisman. The second dive was smoother at first. They passed their previous depth, the cliff face sliding by outside the viewport, until they found the same cave mouth. Helena felt her skin crawl. Something about its shadows seemed different, deeper. They edged closer. Inside, the spirals continued along the walls, converging toward the back where a massive stone door squatted like a sentinel. No hinges. No seams. Just the sense that it could open if something wished it. Lena reached out and touched the viewport. "It's warm," she whispered. Sanjay glanced at her. "What?" "The glass. It's warm." Helena pressed her palm to it. She felt it too, a subtle, radiating heat, utterly wrong for the deep. That's when the sound began again, the subwoofer deep thrum, vibrating through the hull and their bones. The sediment at the cave floor stirred as if breathing. Then a flicker of movement, pale shapes slipping just out of the light. "Returning to surface," Sanjay said, voice clipped. But as he reversed thrust, the lights dimmed. Warning lights flared red on the console. "We've lost 50% power." Mara's voice crackled over the comms from the surface. "What the hell's going on down there?" Before anyone could answer, something struck the submersible from below. Not a hit so much as a shove, enough to pitch them forward, almost into the cave wall. In the lights, Helena caught a glimpse of something gliding past, skin like old marble, ridged, studded with what looked like barnacles, except the barnacles shifted, opening and closing like eyelids. Then it was gone. The power surged back. Without another word, Sanjay pulled them away, climbing steadily toward daylight. But Helena's eyes stayed fixed on the dark below, and she swore she saw the spirals on the stone door slowly turn. The Orpheus's deck was tense. Rourke barked at Mara to run full diagnostics on Nereid. Eric cornered Helena, demanding to know if she'd identified the creature. She could only shake her head. Cephalopod? He suggested. A giant squid? No squid has bones in its skin, Helena said. And those weren't bones. That night, over weak coffee, Helena and Lena compared notes. Lena was pale, her hands trembling. The heat in the viewport, she said. That wasn't from outside. What do you mean? It felt like it came through the glass. Like something was touching it from the other side. At 0200, a storm rolled in. Waves slapped the hull. Helena lay in her bunk, half asleep, when she felt it, the same low thrum, this time in the metal frame of the Orpheus itself. She sat up. From somewhere outside came a wet, sliding sound, followed by a deep knock, knock, knock. By morning, the storm had passed. But when Mara checked the sonar, her face went gray. We've got movement under the ship. Big movement. On the screen, a single massive shape hovered just below the thermocline, easily longer than the Orpheus. No fins. No tail. Just an undulating form that seemed to shift with each scan. The investor's instructions came again. Proceed to final coordinates. The window is closing. The final coordinates were nearly at the trench's deepest point, a place no man's sub had gone. Rourke protested, but Sanjay and Helena both knew refusal wasn't an option. They suited up. This time, Caleb joined again to document. The descent took over an hour, the water outside going from black to an almost oily nothingness, the lights from near it swallowed a few meters from the hull. The sonar painted a picture before their eyes, the cliff face giving way to a vast basin, and at its center, a structure. Not a natural formation. Not even close. A city of stone towers, collapsed bridges, and plazas carved with spirals, all draped in layers of sediment and strange white growths. The basin floor shifted. The white growths pulsed in unison. And then Helena understood they weren't growths at all. They were the barnacle eyes of something sleeping beneath the city. As Nereid drifted over the ruins, the thrum became a roar, and far below something began to rise. The Nereid hung in the water above the ruin like a bug caught in amber. No one spoke. Caleb's camera hummed softly, recording, but even he didn't lift it to his eye. Something moved in the city below. At first, Helena thought it was just drifting silt, until it flowed in the wrong direction, uphill, swirling along the spiral inlays toward the central plaza. The currents didn't touch the sediment anywhere else, just those carved grooves, as if some unseen force was dragging the water itself into a pattern. Then the city shifted. Not collapsed, shifted. Towers tilted as if the ground beneath them swelled. Blocks of stone slid soundlessly against one another. The spirals glowed faintly, like moonlight under ice. Caleb whispered, "We need to leave." The sonar pinged. A single return, directly under the plaza, swelling outward on the display until it filled the whole screen. There was a rumble, not sound exactly, but pressure pushing against their eardrums. The lights flickered. From the center of the plaza, something began to rise. First a ridge, a curve of pale, ridged flesh studded with those shifting barnacle eyes. Then more ridges, branching outward. It took Helena a second to realize they weren't ridges at all, but limbs, dozens of them, each as thick as the Nereid's hull, unfurling in a slow, almost lazy stretch after a long sleep. The barnacle eyes turned upward. All at once. Sanjay hit the thrusters, trying to climb, but the water thickened around them, viscous, like they were rising through syrup. On the monitors, Helena saw the limbs weaving upward, not in a straight chase, but curling into wide arcs, surrounding them. One brushed the sub's spotlight. For a moment, it filled the viewport, marble white, with faint inscriptions carved into the skin. Helena's mind scrambled to process the impossible. The markings were human writing. Proto-Canaanite, Egyptian hieratic, Linear A, dozens of ancient scripts all woven into the flesh. She knew instantly what that meant. "This thing was here before," she breathed. "Before us all." The limbs slid past, leaving a smear of viscous black ichor on the glass that pulsed like it was alive. Sanjay fought the controls, the depth gauge creeping upward inch by inch. Caleb had stopped filming, hands clenched on his harness. The pressure alarms wailed. The hull was being compressed. Then, without warning, the limbs dropped away. The water around them went still. Sanjay didn't wait for an explanation. He pushed the sub hard until the surface sunlight began to filter through. When they broke the surface, Mara and Rourke were shouting through the radio. They'd lost the sub's beacon for nearly 3 minutes. The crane hauled them aboard, and Helena stumbled onto the deck, her ears ringing. The Orpheus was moving. Not by engine power. The water around it was shifting, pulling them slowly but steadily toward the trench. The sky had gone unnaturally still, the sea a flat, black mirror. Mara stared at the sonar readout. The massive shape was following them. Slowly. Patiently. That night, Helena couldn't sleep. The low thrum was back, now in her skull. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the spirals turning, water and stone grinding in unison. She went to the mess hall for tea and found Lena already there, pale and shaking. "They're dreams," Lena whispered, "but not mine. Memories. Someone else's. I was standing on the shore, thousands of years ago, watching it come to land." Helena sat heavily. "It's in us now." "Yes," Lena said. "We touched the pattern. That's all it takes." Before they could speak further, the ship lurched hard to port. Alarm screamed. Rourke's voice boomed over the PA. "All hands to stations. We've got contact." When Helena reached the deck, the water ahead of them was rising, not in a wave, but in a great, circular mound. A spiral. At its center, the black ichor that had smeared the Nereid's viewport was bubbling up from below, spreading across the surface. From within the ichor, limbs emerged, not dozens this time, but 2, each the size of the Orpheus. They didn't strike. They rested on the water, like a predator blocking the only exit. The barnacle eyes opened, and the thrum became a voice. Not words, but meaning. Return what was taken. Helena's stomach dropped. It wasn't the coordinates or the data it wanted. It was the submersible itself, the Nereid. The moment she realized it, a deeper fear bloomed. It didn't want the machine for technology. It wanted the crew. Rourke's knuckles were white on the railing as the thing's limbs rested against the surface. No one moved. The sky above the spiral darkened further, clouds forming in unnatural whirls. "What does it mean, return what was taken?" Mara asked. Helena's throat was dry. "We took images. Measurements. Maybe it considers that theft." "It's not talking about data," Lena said, her voice distant. "It wants the sub back, and the ones who touched the spiral. We're marked." A deep vibration rolled through the Orpheus, not from the engines, but from the water itself. The black ichor spread in every direction, bubbling, swallowing the waves. Caleb whispered, "If we don't go down, it'll take the whole ship." It wasn't a threat. It was inevitability. Rourke looked at Helena. "You're the one who's been down there. If we give it the sub, maybe it leaves us alone." "And if it doesn't?" Helena asked. "Then at least you'll know." There was no time for debate. The crew began lowering the Nereid back into the black ichor. Sanjay and Helena climbed in without a word. Caleb followed, his camera strapped to his chest even now. Lena hesitated, then stepped in as well. As soon as the hatch sealed, the ichor surged upward, swallowing them whole. The water outside wasn't dark, it was absolute void, as if they had left the ocean entirely. The sub's lights illuminated nothing. The thrum returned, stronger than before, until it was all they could hear. Then the blackness peeled back, revealing the city again, but now it wasn't lifeless. The towers glowed from within. Spirals pulsed with light, the patterns shifting in a rhythm that matched their own heartbeats. Figures moved along the streets, slow and graceful, their forms translucent like deep-sea creatures. They had human proportions, but their faces were a shifting blur, as though memory itself couldn't hold their features still. One figure stepped forward and placed a hand on the plaza floor. The ground split, and a chasm yawned open. From within, pale limbs coiled upward, but these were smaller, sinuous, curling protectively around the figure as though in greeting. The voice returned. "Remember." Helena's mind filled with images, not her own. Vast cities on land and sea, humans and these beings walking side by side. Great stone halls carved with spirals that drew the tides. A pact between species, sworn long before history began, broken when humanity forgot the deep. "You're showing us," Helena whispered. The figure inclined its head, the motion unnervingly slow. The vision shifted, battles beneath the waves, storms that wiped coasts clean, the deep beings retreating into their cities to sleep for millennia. And then, explorers, centuries later, disturbing their rest. The spiral patterns were warnings and wards, meant to keep the surface away. But now, they'd been breached again. Caleb's breathing quickened. "We're not supposed to be here." "No," Lena said. "We're supposed to stay away forever." The voice spoke again. One must remain. One must remember. The meaning was clear. The beings demanded an exchange. A living witness to carry the memory forward, to ensure humanity would honor the pact. But to remain meant never returning to the surface. The four of them exchanged glances. Caleb's hands were trembling on his camera. Lena's eyes glistened with something between awe and terror. Sanjay's jaw was clenched. "I'll do it," Lena said. Helena spun toward her. "No. I've seen more than I ever will up there. I think I was meant to see this." The figure reached out, its hand brushing Lena's forehead. Light flared. She gasped, her pupils dilating until her eyes were entirely black. The pale limbs curled around her gently, lifting her from her seat in the sub, drawing her into the city below. The ichor closed over them again. When it cleared, the Nereid was rising, carried upward by unseen currents. They broke the surface into blinding daylight. The ichor was gone, the spiral flattened into still sea. The Orpheus's crew hauled them aboard. Rourke counted the returning faces, his eyes narrowing. "Where's Lena?" Helena swallowed. "She stayed." What the hell do you mean stayed? She's the reason we're alive. No one spoke during the trip back to port. Caleb never turned off his camera, but when they tried to review the footage later, the images of the city were gone, replaced by hours of black screen and that low, endless thrum. At night, Helena still heard it. So did Sanjay. Sometimes, they dreamed of spirals on endless ocean floors, of translucent figures walking among glowing towers. Sometimes, they dreamed of Lena, her face no longer human, calling them back. And each time, Helena woke knowing the truth. The pact was restored, but the ocean never forgets. One day, it would call again,